I knew the exact second my career at Veronix Biosystems ended. It wasn't when the HR director slid a cardboard box across my desk like she was handing me funeral flowers. It wasn't when security appeared behind her, pretending not to look embarrassed. And it definitely wasn't when CEO Grant Maddox pointed toward the elevator and yelled, loud enough for the entire floor to hear, "Get out." No. My career had started dying 6 months earlier. The day Grant Maddox walked into our Seattle headquarters wearing a tailored gray suit, a billionaire's watch, and the kind of smile men use when they already believe they own the room. Before I tell you how Grant Maddox destroyed a $500 million contract with one arrogant command, hit the like button, because this story is only beginning. I'm also curious, where are you watching from? And what's the temperature there today? Drop it in the comments. Now, let me introduce myself. My name is Daisy Knox. I'm not flashy. I don't give speeches about innovation under blue stage lights. I don't post inspirational quotes on LinkedIn. I build things, quietly, precisely, relentlessly, 5 years before Grant arrived. I created the engine that made Veronix valuable, a medical diagnostics platform capable of identifying rare neurological disorders long before traditional scans could detect them. Hospitals called it revolutionary. Investors called it priceless. Patients called it hope. But here's the detail Grant never bothered to understand. Veronix did not own my technology. They licensed it. Before I ever signed my employment contract, I protected the core patent under my own holding company. Veronix could use the platform, sell access to it, and build their entire business around it, but only as long as they followed the license terms, break those terms, and I could pull the engine out of their shiny corporate machine. Grant didn't read that part. Or maybe he read it and thought I was too quiet to ever use it. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was thinking a CEO title could overpower a woman who wrote the code, owned the patent, and still held the keys to the entire system. You know? This story is fictional and created with the help of artificial intelligence to make it more dramatic and engaging. But I believe the emotions it brings can still feel real, behind every twist, every betrayal, and every quiet victory. There are lessons worth keeping. Now, the real storm begins. Grant Maddox arrived at Veronix Biosystems as the man who was supposed to take us to the next level. That was the phrase the board kept using. Next level, strategic expansion, market dominance, investor confidence, all the polished corporate language people use when they want to sell something they did not build. He walked through the research floor on his first morning like he was touring a showroom. He touched equipment he didn't understand. He picked up a neural sensor prototype, turned it over in his hand, and smiled like it was a luxury accessory instead of a medical device designed to help real patients. Daisy Knox. Right? He said, barely looking at me. I nodded. I've heard a lot about you. Brilliant work. Very technical. Very impressive. Then he glanced at the diagnostic display behind me. But we need to simplify the story. The story I asked. The product narrative, Grant said. As if correcting a child. Investors don't want complexity. They want scale. They want clean messaging. Right now. This feels too medical, too heavy, too clinical. We need to position it as predictive wellness, preventive lifestyle intelligence, something people can understand instantly. I stared at him. Grant, I said carefully. This platform identifies rare neurological disorders before standard testing can detect them. It is not a lifestyle gadget. He laughed softly. That's exactly the problem. Daisy, you're thinking like an engineer. I need you to think like a founder. I almost corrected him. I was the founder of the technology, without my patent. Veronix was just a beautiful office with expensive chairs and a logo on the wall, but I stayed quiet. Grant leaned closer to the screen, watching the diagnostic model process patient data. There's a $500 million conversation happening with Halden Crest Capital, he said. $500 million. Daisy? But deals like that require confidence. They require a clean asset, a clean vision. Then he turned to me with that smooth, empty smile. And right now, You are making it feel complicated." That was the first time I understood what he really wanted. He didn't want to protect the technology. He wanted to package it, polish it, sell it, and pretend he had been the visionary all along. The first thing to disappear was my name. Not all at once. Grant Maddox was too polished for that. Men like him never erase you with one dramatic stroke. They do it slowly, carefully, with the patience of someone deleting evidence from a crime scene. At first, it was just the investor decks, slides that used to say, "Diagnostic architecture developed by Daisy Knox," suddenly said, "Veronic's proprietary intelligence system." My research notes became internal innovation assets. My model became our predictive engine. My 5 years of sleepless nights, failed trials, rebuilt code, and patient data validation were flattened into a neat corporate phrase that sounded good under conference room lighting. Then the meeting started moving. The Monday clinical review I had led for years was rescheduled to Thursday mornings, exactly when I had hospital validation calls. The technical risk meeting became a strategic leadership sync, and somehow my calendar invitation never arrived. I would pass the glass conference room and see Grant standing at the screen, explaining my algorithm to people who thought machine learning was magic and regulatory clearance was paperwork you could rush if your watch was expensive enough. My engineers noticed. Of course they did. They just stopped saying anything. When I walked through the lab, conversations died in the air. People who used to ask me questions now sent messages through junior managers. Developers I had trained avoided eye contact, like loyalty was contagious and dangerous. Even the coffee machine felt quieter. One afternoon, I found a printed email beside the copier. It was from Grant to the board. "Legacy technical leadership is slowing the Halden Crest transaction. We need to simplify ownership perception and remove founder dependency before final diligence." Founder dependency. That was me, not the inventor, not the patent holder, not the person whose system made Veronix worth $500 million. A dependency. I folded the paper once, then again, and slipped it into my bag. I didn't shake, I didn't cry, because Grant thought he was removing an obstacle. He had no idea he was warning the one person who could remove the engine from his entire empire. The proof arrived wearing sneakers and carrying an iced latte. His name was Owen Pierce, 23 years old, newly hired as Grant's innovation analyst, which seemed to mean he used words like synergy while mislabeling every technical diagram he touched. Owen was not cruel. That almost made it worse. He was cheerful, eager, and completely unaware that he was helping Grant load the weapon. I was in the break room, staring into a cup of burnt coffee, when Owen hurried in with his tablet. "Daisy." "Quick question," he said. "I'm cleaning up the Halden Crest diligence deck. Grant wants all the ownership language consistent before the buyer review." My body went still. What ownership language? He turned the screen toward me. There it was. A slide showing the core diagnostic architecture I had written, including the adaptive neural pathway that made the entire platform accurate enough for hospital use. Above the diagram, in bold, clean font, were the words "Property of Veronix Biosystems, fully owned corporate asset." For a second, the room became very quiet. Not silent. Quiet. The kind of quiet where your brain stops reacting and starts recording. "Owen," I said calmly, "who told you to write that?" He pointed to a comment bubble on the slide. "Grant Maddox assert full ownership. Remove founder-related liability. Keep narrative clean for acquisition." I looked at those words for a long moment. Grant had not just erased my name. He had crossed a legal line so bright it might as well have been painted in fire. Veronix had usage rights under a license. Nothing more. Claiming full ownership to Halden Crest was not marketing. It was not positioning. It was a material breach. It was fraud dressed in Helvetica. "Could you send me that version?" I asked. Owen smiled. "Sure. Want to check formatting? Exactly," I said. 2 minutes later, the deck landed in my inbox. I downloaded it, saved a time-stamped copy, and forwarded it from my personal email to my attorney. Mara Ellison, my message was short. Document the breach. Mara replied in less than 3 minutes. Confirmed. License violation is clear. Do you want to initiate revocation? I sat at my desk, reading her message while the office moved around me like nothing had changed. Phones rang. Keyboards clicked. Someone laughed near the windows. Grant's brass confidence machine kept running at full speed. Unaware that a crack had just opened beneath it, my finger hovered over the keyboard. Yes would have been easy. One word. And the entire Halden Crest transaction would begin collapsing before dinner. The board would panic. Legal would scramble. Grant would probably storm into my office, red-faced and loud, accusing me of sabotage, and that was exactly why I did not type it. Not yet. If I pulled the license at that moment, Grant would control the story. He would call me unstable, bitter, difficult, a founder refusing to let the company grow. He would tell the board I was using technicalities to hold everyone hostage because my ego could not survive being replaced. Men like Grant always know how to make theft sound like leadership. So I waited. I wrote back to Mara. Not yet. Preserve everything. I need him on record. Her answer came quickly. Understood. Let him speak. That became the plan for the next several days. I watched Grant perform confidence like a man standing on a trapdoor. He marched through the office, announcing milestones for the Halden Crest deal. Legal review progressing. Financial diligence nearly complete. Buyer confidence increasing. Every announcement made people clap. Every clap sounded to me like dirt hitting a coffin lid. He was so sure silence meant weakness. He thought I was afraid. He thought I had already accepted being pushed aside. But silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is strategy. I kept my head down. I backed up documents. I saved emails. I took notes after every meeting. I let Grant keep talking, keep polishing his lie, keep building the stage where he would eventually destroy himself. All I needed was one public mistake, and Grant Maddox was arrogant enough to give it to me. The moment came on a Friday morning. Inside the glass conference room, everyone called the aquarium. Grant had gathered the whole company for what he called a strategic alignment meeting. The board sat along one side of the table. The Halden Crest observers joined by video. My engineers stood near the walls, quiet and tense, as if the room itself had already warned them something ugly was coming. Grant stood at the front with his sleeves rolled up, pretending to be humble. Veronix is entering a new era, he said. And new eras require hard decisions. His eyes found me. There it was. Daisy Knox has been with this company from the early days. He continued. She contributed to the original technical foundation, and we appreciate that. Contributed. I almost smiled. But what built the past cannot always lead the future. Grant said, we need people who understand scale, discipline, and business reality. Unfortunately, Daisy has resisted that evolution. A few people looked down. Grant's voice sharpened. She has attempted to create confusion around company assets. She has implied that technology developed under Veronix belongs personally to her. Let me be clear. The platform, the code, and the patents supporting our commercial product are Veronix property. There it was, on record, in front of the board, in front of employees, in front of buyer representatives. Perfect. Grant turned fully toward me. Effective immediately. Your employment is terminated for cause. Pack your things and get out. The words hit the room like a slap. 2 security guards stepped forward from the hallway. He had planned the image. The difficult woman removed. The visionary CEO restored to control. I picked up my bag. You're making a mistake. Grant, I said. His face hardened. The only mistake was letting you believe you were bigger than this company. Now get out. I walked past him without another word. By the time the elevator doors closed, I already had my phone in my hand. I opened the encrypted chat with Mara. He did it. Her reply came instantly. Then we begin. If you think Grant Maddox was right to humiliate me and claim my patent as his company's property. Comment fair. But if you believe he crossed the line, comment betrayal for me. That moment wasn't just about losing a job. It was about seeing the truth behind his smile. Outside the building, Seattle rain had begun falling in thin silver lines, turning the sidewalk into a mirror of the glass tower I had just been thrown out of. I stood under the awning, breathing slowly, while my phone vibrated again. Mara, I have the notice ready. Confirm authorization. I looked back through the lobby windows. Security had returned to their posts. Reception was answering calls. Upstairs, Grant Maddox was probably smiling at the board, convincing them the difficult engineer had finally been removed and the $500 million deal was safe. He had no idea the safest thing in that building had just walked out of it. I typed one word: authorize. At 10:42 a.m., Mara Ellison sent the formal notice to Revoked Biosystems General Counsel, the Board of Directors, and the Registered Transaction Counsel for Halden Crest Capital. Subject notice of license revocation. Immediate action required. The message was clean, precise, and deadly. Under Section 14 of the Master Technology License Agreement, Daisy Knox hereby revokes Revoked Biosystems' right to use, commercialize, modify, market, or represent ownership of the Knox diagnostic engine due to material breach, including false claims of corporate ownership and unlawful termination of the patent holder without proper cause. Effective 24 hours from receipt. Revoked would be required to cease all operations relying on my licensed technology. Not negotiate. Not explain. Cease. I went home, made tea, and placed my phone face down on the kitchen counter. For the first hour, nothing happened. Then a text came from Elias, my systems lead. Legal just ran into Grant's office. Door slammed. People are staring. A few minutes later, another. Grant is yelling. Loud. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. This time, Grant's name appeared. I watched it buzz against the counter until the screen went dark. For months, he had mistaken my patience for fear. Now the clock belonged to me. By the next morning, my phone looked like a crime scene. Missed calls from Grant. Missed calls from Veronic's legal. Messages that began with threats and slowly softened into panic. At 7:18 a.m., Grant wrote, "This is reckless." At 7:46, he wrote, "We can discuss your concerns." By 8:12, it had become, "Daisy, call me, please." I made coffee and waited for the only call that mattered. It came at 9:27. A calm male voice introduced himself as Julian Cross, lead counsel for Halden Crest Capital. He did not sound angry. He sounded worse than angry. He sounded precise. "Ms. Knox," he said, "we received a notice indicating that Revoked Biosystems does not own the diagnostic engines supporting the acquisition. That is correct. And that the license allowing Revoked to operate the platform expires in roughly 90 minutes. Also correct." There was a pause. Papers shifted on his end. Our understanding from Mr. Maddox was that the technology was a fully owned corporate asset. That was never true. I said, "Grant knew there was a license. He chose to describe it differently." Julian exhaled once. Quietly. "Then Halden Crest has a serious problem. We are not deploying $500 million to purchase a company whose core product cannot legally operate by lunchtime. I assumed you wouldn't." He thanked me for my clarity and ended the call. At 10:42 a.m., the revocation became effective. No sirens went off, no building exploded, but somewhere inside Revoked, the entire deal died. Elias texted me minutes later. "Halden Crest team just walked into the aquarium. Grant looks pale." Another message followed. "They froze the acquisition." I stared at those 4 words for a long time. Grant had spent 6 months trying to make me invisible. Now the buyer could see only one thing. Without my technology, Revoked was worth nothing. I was not in the aquarium when Grant Maddox finally lost control. I know what happened because Elias told me later, and because Mara eventually received copies of the emergency board notes. Apparently, Julian Cross stood at the head of the table with one printed document in his hand and explained the situation in a voice so calm it made everyone else sound hysterical. Halden Crest was suspending the acquisition indefinitely, not delaying, not reviewing, suspending. Grant tried to laugh it off at first. He told them I was emotional. He said I was angry about being removed and using legal threats to force my way back into the company. He called it a negotiation tactic. Then Julian placed the license agreement on the table. He pointed to the ownership clause. Then the breach clause. Then the revocation provision Grant had apparently never bothered to read. One of the board members, Leonard Vale, asked the only question that mattered. Grant, did you terminate the patent holder yesterday? Elias said Grant went quiet for the first time in months. Then Leonard asked, and did you tell the buyer this technology was fully owned by Veronix? Grant started talking fast. Too fast. He said he had been streamlining the narrative. He said founder dependency scared investors. He said I was difficult, resistant, not aligned with growth. Leonard cut him off. You risked a $500 million acquisition because you wanted a cleaner story by noon. The board had entered emergency session by 1. Grant was no longer CEO. The same security guards he had used to escort me out were asked to escort him from the executive floor. Elias said Grant looked stunned, as if consequences were something that happened to other people. At 2:36 p.m., Mara forwarded me the first board email. Daisy. We deeply regret the misunderstanding regarding your departure. We would like to discuss immediate reinstatement, license restoration, and a substantial retention package. I read the word misunderstanding twice. Then I closed the email. They did not regret what they had done. They regretted discovering I still had the power to answer no. 3 days later, I met Leonard Vale in a quiet coffee shop far from the Veronix office. He looked older than I remembered. Not wiser, just tired. We want you back, he said. CTO title, board seat, equity increase, public apology, name your price. I stirred my coffee once. I don't want a title from a company that tried to erase me. His jaw tightened. Then what do you want, my technology? The silence between us was almost polite. By the end of the week, Mara had the asset transfer agreement on my desk. Veronix released all claims connected to the Knox diagnostic engine, the supporting datasets, and the research infrastructure built around it. In return, I dropped the infringement action and walked away. I hired Elias first, then Owen, who apologized 3 times before I told him to stop. Then the engineers who had kept their heads down because rent still had to be paid, and courage is easier when bills are not due. We launched under a new name, Knox Meridian Labs. No gongs, no fake visionaries, no men selling gardens they never watered. This time, the keys stayed with the person who built the door. This story reminded me that real strength does not always need to shout. Sometimes it waits, prepares, and acts with precision. The first lesson I learned is that I must always know my own worth. Even when others try to reduce me to a title, a salary, or a seat in the office. The second lesson is that protecting my work is not selfish. It is necessary, because people who did not build it may still try to claim it. The third lesson is that patience can be more powerful than anger when it is guided by truth and preparation. What about you? Did this story leave you with a lesson of your own? Share it in the comments, because your perspective may help someone else feel stronger today. And if this story moved you, please subscribe, like, comment, and share it. You never know who needs to hear this message right now.
Welcome to Boardroom Revenge Stories, a channel focused on workplace conflict, corporate betrayal, power struggles, and quiet justice. Our stories follow a structured workflow to deliver a consistent, immersive experience. We start by analyzing real discussions on Reddit, Facebook, Quora, and blogs. Next, we craft original scripts using AI tools like ChatGPT. We then use 11 Labs to transform text into high-quality voice and edit everything in CapCut for a smooth, cinematic finish. Thumbnails are designed with Canva, and every video is carefully reviewed before release. These stories go beyond entertainment, revealing how power truly works and how justice quietly unfolds.